You just got a fat tire e-bike that you want to use to go fishing with. Well, how do you rig it up, and how's that different from how you would rig up a regular mountain bike for the same thing? Well, I'm going to cover fresh and salt water. Stay tuned. But before we get into customization, I need to do a test drive of this MokWheel Upland Plus on the beach to make sure that it's got the power, the stability, and the comfort to be able to operate in that environment. If it'll work there, it'll work on a mountain trail, no problem at all, where you're not slipping on sand all the time. So let's switch to the beach, and then we'll come back here to the garage. Well, now it's time for the key test. Can I use this surf fishing? Will it run on the sand? Now on the beach, there's 3 types of sand you have to deal with on a bike. Ideally, you're at low tide, because as the tide goes out, the sand gets really packed down by the water's edge, and it's really nice and hard, and that's where I used to ride my regular 2-inch tire mountain bike. Then between that and the loose sand above the high tide line, it gets really mushy, and that's where the challenge is, because if you have a fat tire bike and you can go in that mushy sand, well, you can pretty much get out here and fish anytime. Now the loose sand, I know, is going to be a challenge for anything, because your wheels are going to slide all over every place, but I'm going to give that a try anyway. So let me set the tripod up, I'll point it downrange, and let's see how we do. First, in this clip, I'm running down the hard pack, no problem at all, just like being on asphalt. And then I moved up a little bit to the mushy sand between the waves and the high tide line. The fat tires handled that without an issue. I was very stable, and then I started to come back through some very loose sand, and you'll see the bike shudder here a little bit as I slipped in the sand. So my bottom line, of course, just like in any fat tire e-bike, is when the sand is really, really loose, you need to stay away from that. That's a good opportunity to use walk mode. Let's check this thing out on the moderately loose sand right above the high tide line. You can see, even though I'm going fairly slowly, the bike has plenty of stability, and I'm able to move smoothly through this loose sand. Not a problem at all. Here is where I made a mistake, and you need to understand how the power assist level works. You notice how I kind of stall out there at the top? Remember that the throttle maxes out at the top of each power assist level. So when you approach a hill, like I was doing here, I should have been in a higher power assist level, anticipating that I would need some additional oomph and throttle to make it over the loose sand at this hump. Once I understood that, no problem on this bike. Well, let me get back to the shop. I'll show you how I'm going to set this up for fishing. You know, the key difference really just boils down to weight and how you're going to deal with transporting your fat tire e-bike versus your mountain bike. But everything else is pretty much the same with just a couple wrinkles. So I guess the first thing to talk about is how much stuff do you really want to take with you? Well, whether I'm going to the surf or the mountains on trails, all the stuff in terms of gear, you know, like fishing gear, lures and things like that, will fit in this backpack. And that way, if I leave the bike, I can go ahead and put the backpack on and still have my stuff there as I wander up a stream on the river, or not really so much in the surf, but I wander away from the bike. So how are you going to carry this? Well, you can be a grunt and carry it on your back, or you can carry it in your milk crate or in your saddlebags. And so here's the first big decision you've got to make. Saddlebags are, in my mind, are the way to go, because there's other stuff that's going to want to go up into your milk crate. And the key thing about needing a milk crate is that is the logical place to mount your rod holder. So the first thing to do is to decide, are you fresh or are you salt? If you're saltwater, your milk crate will feature vertical rod holders because your surf rods are generally heavy, and they may as well stand up because you're not going to run into any trees or limbs overhanging the trail. Whereas on freshwater, that's where you want a canted rod holder. So your rod sticks out the back. Can't get this in here with the garage, but it's going to fit in there like that. And that way it's going to skim right underneath all the trees. And note, and I've got different videos on how to do this that I'll link up. I've got a notch here for a fly rod as well as a notch here for a spin rod. So this one will do for both. Now if you want to carry multiple rods, well, you just need more of these. So given all your gear is pretty much backpackable, well, what do you really need for saddlebags? You can get an inexpensive set like this. I think this costs under $30, and it's actually just perfect for fitting everything in here. Or if you need a lot of stuff, you can get one of these big boys right here. These are much more expensive. I think this one costs $80. It comes with a waterproof cover, so you can cover it. And you can put this on maybe if you're going to do some rough camping overnight, because as you can see, it's got plenty of room and it's got pockets on the back for water bottles and things like that. Well, I think I'm more of a fan of the lightweight saddlebag because that's really all I need. I don't need, what I've got in this backpack would really just fit in one half of that saddlebag. So I don't really need that. And that kind of brings us to the key issue with a fat tire e-bike for fishing. These things are hefty. They weigh a lot. This one weighs in at 80 pounds with the battery on. The battery weighs just under 10 pounds. So you would never transport that on the back of your vehicle with that battery mounted. But even so, that puts it at exactly, right about 70 pounds, which is the max for a reasonably priced trailer hitch. So you don't want to have a lot of stuff permanently mounted to your e-bike. Instead, you want to be able to put it on and off quickly. So the real difference in terms of how you're going to configure your fat tire e-bike versus a regular mountain bike really comes down to just weight. These suckers are heavy. They got the heavy motor, they got the heavy battery, fat tires, solid aluminum frame. This MokWheel is made out of aluminum alloy with really heavy welds, so it's not going to fall apart. Really solidly constructed, but all that means weight. So you would never transport it on the back of your hitch with the battery attached, because that's 10 pounds right there. And so you take that away, and this particular bike weighs in at just about 70 pounds. So anything I add to this for fishing really needs to be quickly removable, so I do not exceed the hitch capacity for my trailer hitch on my truck. And so that means a lot of the stuff you would permanently mount to a mountain bike, like for example, your water bottle holder and things like that, really can't fit on there. Instead, all those end up having to migrate back to your milk crate. So obviously I've got my two rod holders here, but on the other side, that's where I mounted the water bottle. This is where I've got my lock. I mean, this sucker weighs probably about 2 or 3 pounds by itself. I've got my pump right here, which on my mountain bike, I have mounted, gyrating around. I've got mounted back here to the seat stem. Now the other thing you're going to want is you're going to want some kind of pouch up here that you can put your phone in and some tools and things like that. But again, those tools weigh something. So you've got to make the decision on whether you want to permanently mount a pouch, and then where you're going to mount it. Note that if I were going to put a pouch on this heavy bike, I would put it here instead of there, because the fat tires raise this up a little bit, making the standover height just a little bit higher than what I'd experience on the mountain bike. So I don't want to have to dodge this pouch getting over it. But this is easily mountable. So at the trailhead or wherever you're going to get on the road to start using this can pop on fairly quickly. And that's the bottom line for everything. You note that I've got a front pouch up here as well, and just like the milk crate, I could put water bottles in here if I needed it. And when you're out in the sun on the beach, you know, that's a pretty critical thing. Other things that would go in my milk crate, as opposed to the saddlebags, would be my small cooler, my cast net, and again for surf, you're probably using bait, and that's where I'd have this inexpensive garbage can with a carabiner clip. Now, a key component to the e-bike to make this successful is it needs to come with a heavy-duty rear rack and fenders, because after all, you don't want all that water spewing up into you. And the MokWheel Upland Plus, which is sitting here, has all those as standard. I had to go out and buy everything back here from my mountain bike, the front fender, the rack, and all that kind of stuff, and that kind of sucked. So anyway, to get the milk crate on the back and have it quickly removable, I use one of two approaches. You can get these heavy-duty silicone ties, or you can do heavy-duty zip ties. If you use the regular size zip ties, the ones that are about a little over 1/8 of an inch wide, then you need to double up and use about 8 of them, because the weight of the milk crate is going to tip back and forth and those things are going to pop off. Another item you can mount is a handlebar extension that I've got right here, where you can put a GoPro mount on there. I've got a light on here because the mountain bike did not come with a light, and you could actually hang that front pouch that I've got attached to the handlebars over here from that. This is kind of handy because it's got a little bit of insulation in here, so you could take your lunch in there. And again, this is just Velcroed on, so it can come off and you don't need to transport the bike with this on. So the good news is, if you're thoughtful in terms of how you organize everything, you can take pretty much whatever you want with you on your bike. And with an e-bike, of course, with this additional power, you can take a heavier load than you want to push on a mountain bike with just your human power. But what you take depends on how you fish, where you fish, and what you fish with. If you've got ideas for how to transport gear efficiently on a heavy e-bike or even on a mountain bike, I'm all ears, because I use both of these to get to fishing depending on where I'm going. And I can use the tips. Thanks, throw them down below.